All eyes turned to the man in the faded blue uniform pushing a cleaning cart through the gleaming corridors of the Anderson Cancer Research Center in Houston. His calloused hands gripped the mop handle with a tremor he couldn't hide, and his weathered face bore the scars of a man who'd lost everything but those hands held knowledge that would soon save a 9-year-old girl whom science had abandoned, and reveal a secret that would shake the foundations of America's most prestigious cancer hospital. It was a cold January night when Jonathan Hayes, 42 years old, arrived at the hospital's advanced research wing with his cleaning cart. His rubber boots squeaked against the marble floors as he pushed past the glass-walled laboratories, where brilliant scientists developed experimental treatments costing millions of dollars. John had worked as a lab cleaning assistant for 2 years now, invisible to the oncologists in their white coats, transparent to the researchers discussing publications in prestigious journals, non-existent to the directors deciding which projects would receive funding. He cleaned the same benches where miracles of modern medicine happen daily, his eyes occasionally catching glimpses of genetic sequences and experimental protocols that meant nothing to most janitors but everything to him. As it's written in the Bible verses his mother used to read, God chooses the weak of the world to confound the wise. John didn't feel chosen, just broken. The hospital was in complete crisis that night. A 9-year-old patient named Emma Richardson was in the pediatric ICU, fighting a leukemia so rare and aggressive it had baffled every specialist. 2 weeks. That's all the girl had left. Every experimental protocol had failed. Each therapy attempted seemed only to enrage the cancer cells, which adapted with terrifying speed. In the main laboratory, surrounded by screens showing genetic sequences and MRI data, the country's best oncologists were at war with an invisible enemy that didn't follow rules. "This is impossible, Doctor," Richard Thornton shouted, slamming his clipboard on the lab table. He was 58, Harvard Medical School, and had spent 30 years building his reputation as one of the world's greatest cancer researchers. 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks before this child dies and all our years of research are thrown in the trash. Richard, we've tried everything, said Dr. Amanda Foster, 44, a molecular oncologist who'd published dozens of papers on rare leukemias. The genetic mutation is behaving completely atypically. Every time we introduce a therapy, the cells adapt within days. It's like the cancer is learning. Then teach it something different. Richard bellowed. Use immunotherapy. CAR-T, something. We have, said Dr. Lawrence Bennett, 52, head of the hospital's ethics committee and guardian of research protocols. His voice was cold and calculating. All within FDA-approved protocols, of course. We can't just experiment on a child like like some people did in the past. The veiled reference made several researchers look uncomfortably at the floor. What do you mean by that, Lawrence? Amanda asked, though she already knew the answer. I mean, there's a difference between responsible science and desperate quackery, Lawrence said. Remember that charlatan Hayes? The man who played God with terminal patients. He also thought he was saving lives, until he killed people with his pseudoscience. Through the glass wall of the laboratory, John's hands gripped the mop handle tighter. They were talking about him. They always talked about him, never knowing he was just feet away. Listening to every word of contempt. He didn't kill anyone, came a soft voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. Nurse Sandra Price, 61, a 40-year veteran of the hospital, stood there with a medical clipboard. Her face showed disapproval. Sorry to interrupt, doctors, but the records show Hayes's patients were all terminal stage. They died of cancer, not the treatment. They died because he used them as guinea pigs, Lawrence retorted. And I won't allow this girl to be treated like an experiment. We'll follow protocols. End of discussion. Even if the protocols don't work, Sandra challenged. Even if she dies while we wait for approvals? Yes, Lawrence said firmly. Because that's how medicine works. With ethics. With processes. Not with desperate cowboys ignoring rules. John continued pushing his cart, his movements mechanical, practiced, invisible. That's what he'd learned to be. Just the cleaning man. The guy who empties trash cans and mops floors. Nobody important. Nobody dangerous. Nobody who used to be one of the most brilliant oncologists in the country. What about the parents? Asked a young voice. It was Dr. Marcus Webb, an oncology resident of only 28, too young to have been around during John's scandal. What do we tell them? That we're giving up. We're not giving up, Richard said, though his voice sounded hollow. We keep trying variations of existing protocols. We adjust dosages. We hope for a miracle. Miracles, Amanda laughed bitterly. Richard, do you believe in miracles? Because I don't. I believe in science. And science is saying this girl is going to die. Then science is failing, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. Emma is 9 years old. She likes to draw unicorns. Yesterday she asked me if she'd get better in time for her birthday in March. I lied and said yes. But she won't live until March, will she? Heavy silence filled the laboratory. John stopped cleaning. Through the glass, he could see a computer screen someone had left open. Genetic data. Complete sequencing of Emma's tumor. Mutation analysis. Treatment history. Everything there, glowing in the semi-darkness. He shouldn't look. It wasn't his business. He was just the cleaning man. The ex-convict. The man who'd lost everything: his career, his reputation, his freedom, his son. Michael. His son Michael. 6 years old. Leukemia. Dead while John waited for FDA approvals to test a treatment that could have saved him. 9 months of bureaucracy. 9 months watching his son waste away. 9 months of empty promises that soon the protocol would be approved. Michael died 3 days before the approval came through. John had gone mad with grief. He'd sworn he would never let bureaucracy kill another child. He started treating terminal patients in secret, using experimental therapies he'd developed. He saved 8 lives, 8 children who should have died, who lived, who grew up, and he was imprisoned for it. Conducting unauthorized clinical trials, violation of FDA protocols, endangering lives, 5 years in federal prison, medical license revoked, career destroyed, name ruined, reduced to cleaning the same laboratories where he once conducted groundbreaking research. But 8 children lived. 8 families didn't have to bury their kids. Was it worth it? John didn't know anymore. He looked at the screen with Emma's data. His eyes, trained by 15 years of molecular oncology research, scanned the genetic sequences in seconds. And there it was. He saw it. A mutation. Tiny, or rare, hidden among thousands of other genetic variations. A mutation that 99% of oncologists would ignore because it seemed insignificant. But John knew. He'd seen this exact mutation once before, in one of his unauthorized patients. A 7-year-old boy everyone had declared lost. John had saved that boy, and he knew how to save Emma. His hands stopped trembling. He looked around the empty laboratory the scientists had left for their endless meetings. He was alone. There was a discarded paper near the printer, a forgotten pen on the bench. John took both and began to write. The formula flowed from his pen like water. Combination therapy using 3 specific inhibitors nobody would think to combine. Targeted immunotherapy using CAR T cells modified in a way he'd pioneered, but never published. Precise dosages based on Emma's weight, 28 kilograms according to the data on screen, and her liver metabolism compromised by previous chemotherapy. He wrote the possible side effects: febrile neutropenia, cytokine release syndrome, neurotoxicity. And next to each one, he wrote exactly how to neutralize these effects with specific corticosteroids, antipyretics, and fluid support. It was 3 pages of medical analysis so detailed and precise that any competent oncologist would recognize it as an expert's work. When he finished, John looked at what he'd written. His hand trembled again. This could save Emma. He was certain as he could be about anything in medicine. But he was nobody. A criminal. A cleaning man. If he left this here, it would be ignored, thrown in the trash, or worse, used without credit, and if it failed, he'd be blamed even without having touched the patient. God, John whispered to the empty laboratory, if you're listening, if any of the verses my mother read mean anything, please, let this save this girl. Let Michael's death mean something. He folded the paper and left it on the central bench, right where the researchers would see it in the morning. Then he returned to his cart and continued cleaning, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. The hands that once healed, that were condemned for daring to challenge the system, had touched one more life. Now it remained to wait and see if anyone would listen. At 6 a.m. when the night shift ended, John saw a doctor. Richard Thornton arrived early at the laboratory. He saw him pick up the paper. He saw his expression change from irritation to confusion, from confusion to absolute shock. Richard ran out of the laboratory. "Amanda, Lawrence, come see this." John watched from afar as the three scientists gathered around the paper, reading and rereading. Their voices carried excitement, disbelief, hope. This is genius," Amanda murmured. "Who wrote this?" "I don't know," Richard said. "It was here when I arrived." But look, the analysis of the mutation in the alternative BCRABL gene. We weren't even looking at that. We thought it was noise in the data. "It's not noise," Lawrence said slowly, his skepticism being replaced by reluctant admiration. "It's the key. Whoever wrote this understands molecular oncology at a level I've never seen. The combination therapy. It's unconventional, but the logic is flawless. Can we make this work?" Marcus Webb asked, his eyes shining with renewed hope. "I don't know," Richard admitted. "We'd need approval from the ethics committee. We'd need to verify the dosages. We need to save a girl who's going to die in 2 weeks." Amanda interrupted him. "Richard, you said it yourself. We've tried everything else. If this has a chance, but who wrote it?" Lawrence insisted. "How can I approve a protocol when I don't know the source?" "The source is brilliant, whoever it is," Richard said. "Look at the precision, the calculations, the protocols for neutralizing side effects. This is the work of someone with years of experience in experimental therapies." Sandra Price walked past them carrying supplies. She stopped, looked at the paper, and her eyebrows rose. "May I see?" she asked. Richard handed her the paper. Sandra read in silence, and John saw the exact moment she recognized the style. She looked up and swept the corridor until her gaze met his. Recognition. Sandra knew. She'd worked with Jonathan Hayes 10 years ago, before the fall. She'd seen his handwriting 1,000 times in medical charts. She knew how he thought, how he approached impossible problems. She looked at John for a long moment. Then, silently, she returned the paper to Richard. "Use this," she said. "Whoever wrote it is trying to save a life. That's all that matters." As she walked away, she passed close to John. Without looking at him, she murmured too quietly for the others to hear, "I know it's you, John. And what you just did. It's the bravest thing I've seen in 40 years of nursing." John felt tears stinging his eyes. Someone knew. Someone recognized him not as the criminal, not as the charlatan, but as the healer he'd always tried to be. Over the following hours, John watched from afar as the medical team mobilized. Richard convened an emergency meeting of the ethics committee. Amanda began verifying every calculation in the mysterious protocol. Marcus ran to the hospital pharmacy to check if they had the necessary medications in stock. John continued cleaning, invisible as always, but now with a different weight in his chest: hope, fear, the terrifying possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, he could make a difference again. "This is madness," Lawrence Bennett said during the emergency meeting at 9 a.m. John was cleaning the corridor outside the conference room, but he could hear every word through the slightly open door. "You want me to approve a treatment protocol written by an anonymous source? Do you understand how insane that sounds?" "Lawrence, look at the data." Amanda's voice was insistent. "I've spent the last 3 hours verifying every calculation. The mutation analysis is correct. The combination therapy addresses resistance mechanisms we hadn't even considered. This isn't just good science, it's revolutionary science. That doesn't change the fact that we don't know who wrote it," Lawrence countered. "For all we know, it could be a prank. Or worse, sabotage." "A prank?" Richard's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Lawrence, whoever wrote this has PhD-level knowledge of molecular oncology, clinical experience with adaptive leukemias, and familiarity with cutting-edge immunotherapy protocols. This isn't someone Googling cancer treatments. This is an expert." "Then where is this expert?" Lawrence demanded. "Why hide? Why not present this properly through channels?" John gripped his mop handle tighter. He knew exactly why. Because proper channels had let Michael die. Because proper channels prioritized paperwork over lives. Because proper channels had destroyed him for daring to save children the system had abandoned. Maybe they can't, came Marcus's young voice. Maybe there's someone who's been pushed out of the system. Someone who still cares about saving lives even though they can't practice anymore. You mean someone like that criminal Hayes, Lawrence said coldly. Someone who broke every ethical rule and got exactly what he deserved. John felt his chest tighten. Even now, 10 years later, his name was spoken with contempt. The charlatan, the rule breaker, the man who played God, never the man who saved 8 children. Did he? Sandra's voice cut through the argument. John hadn't realized she was in the meeting. Dr. Bennett, I was here when Hayes worked in this hospital. I saw his research. I saw how he cared for patients. And I saw what happened when his son died while he waited for bureaucracy to approve a treatment. That doesn't excuse. It doesn't excuse breaking rules, Sandra agreed. But it explains it. And Lawrence, let me ask you something. If your child was dying and you had a treatment that could save them, but you had to wait 9 months for approval, what would you do? Silence. That's what I thought, Sandra said quietly. Now, we have a 9-year-old girl who will die in 2 weeks. We have a treatment protocol that might save her. Are we going to let her die because we're more concerned about protocol than results? Medicine without protocol is chaos, Lawrence said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. And protocol without compassion is cruelty, Sandra replied. I vote we use this treatment, with monitoring, with safeguards. But we use it. I second that, Marcus said immediately. Third, Amanda added. All eyes turned to Richard and Lawrence. Richard looked at the papers in front of him. John could see through the glass door as the older doctor ran his hand through his gray hair, the weight of the decision visible on his face. If we do this, Richard said slowly, and it works, we won't know who to credit. If we do this and it fails, we'll all be responsible. I can live with that, Amanda said. Can you live with not trying? Richard looked at Lawrence. This is your call. Your ethics committee chair. Lawrence was silent for a long moment. Then, I want full documentation. Every step, every dosage, every reaction. If we're going to do this, we do it right. And if we can figure out who wrote this protocol, I want to know. Is that a yes? Marcus asked, barely containing his hope. That's a heavily conditional yes, Lawrence said. But yes, God help us all. John's knees nearly buckled with relief. He leaned against the wall, his mop forgotten, tears streaming down his face. Emma would get the treatment. She had a chance. That afternoon, John was cleaning near the pediatric ICU when he saw them preparing Emma for the new protocol. Through the window, he could see the little girl in her hospital bed, pale and thin, her mother holding her hand while reading from a children's Bible. And Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me," the mother read, her voice thick with tears. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Emma looked up at her mother with eyes too wise for 9 years. Mommy, am I going to die? No, baby, her mother said, though her voice broke. The doctors are going to try something new, something special. Will it hurt? Maybe a little. But you're so brave. The bravest girl I know. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, if I die, will I see God? John had to turn away. He couldn't watch. It was too much like Michael, too much like the conversations he'd had with his own son, the lies he'd told about everything being okay, the false hope he'd given. Mr. Hayes? John turned. Sandra stood there, her face gentle with understanding. You should go home, she said. Your shift ended an hour ago. I know, John said. I wanted to make sure she's going to get the treatment, Sandra said. Starting in 2 hours. Drive. Foster is personally overseeing it. She's good, John. If anyone can execute your protocol correctly, it's her. It's not my protocol, John said automatically. I don't know what you're talking about. Sandra smiled sadly. John, I've known you for 12 years. I watched you work when you were at the top of your field. I saw your brilliance, and I saw the system destroy you for caring too much. She put her hand on his arm. What you wrote last night could save that little girl's life. You know that, right? Even if I knew what you're talking about, John said carefully, it wouldn't matter. I'm nobody. Just a janitor. A convicted felon who can't practice medicine. You're Jonathan Hayes, Sandra said firmly. You lost your credentials, but you didn't lose your gift. You didn't lose your knowledge, and you certainly didn't lose your heart." Her eyes were fierce. "I don't care what they call you. I don't care what the courts decided. You're still a healer, John. You always have been." John wiped his eyes. "I lost my license. I lost everything." "You lost permission to practice openly," Sandra corrected. "But you can still help. You can still save lives. Maybe not with your name on it. Maybe not with recognition. But does that really matter? Or does saving Emma matter more?" John thought about that as he walked to his car in the cold January night. Purpose. Redemption. The verses from the Bible his mother used to read. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Did God have a plan for him? Or was he just a broken man trying to find meaning in suffering? He didn't know. But for the first time in 5 years, he had hope. The next 48 hours were the longest of John's life. He came to work each night, cleaned the laboratories as always, and watched from the shadows as Emma received the treatment protocol he'd designed. He saw the 4 bags of carefully calibrated medications, the CAR-T cells being infused, the monitors tracking every vital sign. He saw Dr. Amanda Foster standing vigil at Emma's bedside, personally overseeing every step. He saw Marcus Webb checking and rechecking the dosages. He saw Richard Thornton reviewing the genetic markers every 6 hours, looking for signs of response or resistance. And he saw Emma's mother, Sarah Richardson, sitting by her daughter's bed, reading verses from the Bible and praying for a miracle. On the 3rd day, John was cleaning the main laboratory at 2 a.m. when he heard rapid footsteps in the corridor. Amanda burst through the doors, her face flushed with excitement. "Richard! Richard, wake up!" She was shouting into her phone. "The latest blood work just came back. The cancer markers are dropping. Dropping, Richard. The blast cell count is down 40% in 72 hours." John's mop clattered to the floor. He stood frozen, hardly daring to believe. "I know it's early," Amanda was saying. "I know we can't be certain yet. But Richard, this is working. The protocol is actually working. Whoever wrote this, they might have just saved her life." John sat down heavily on a lab stool, his hands shaking. It was working. Emma was responding. The treatment he'd designed from memory, from experience, from desperation and hope, it was working. He put his face in his hands and wept. "Are you okay?" John looked up, startled. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, still in his scrubs from the emergency room. The young resident looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright with wonder. "I'm fine," John said quickly, wiping his face. "Just tired. Long shift." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he walked into the lab and closed the door behind him. "You're not just a janitor, are you?" Marcus said quietly. John felt his blood run cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. I clean laboratories. That's all." "I've been watching you for 2 years," Marcus said. "I've seen you looking at research data when you think no one's paying attention. I've seen you reading journals in the break room, medical journals, oncology journals. That's not typical janitor behavior." "I like to read," John said defensively. "Is that a crime?" "No," Marcus said. "But conducting unauthorized clinical trials is. That's what got Jonathan Hayes sent to prison 10 years ago." John stood up, reaching for his cleaning cart. "I need to finish my shift." "Wait," Marcus said, stepping in front of him. "I'm not here to accuse you of anything. I'm here because," he took a deep breath, 10 years ago, when I was 18, my little sister got leukemia. She was 14. Stage 4. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less. They tried everything. Nothing worked." John's hands gripped the cart handle tighter. "Then one night," Marcus continued, "a doctor approached my parents. He said he had an experimental treatment. It wasn't approved. It was risky. But he'd seen similar cases, and he believed it could work. My parents were desperate. They said yes." "Marcus," John started. "Emily," Marcus said. "My sister's name was Emily Webb. She got the treatment in secret. The doctor visited her at night, after his regular shifts. He monitored her closely, adjusted dosages, managed side effects, and after 3 months, she went into remission." John felt tears streaming down his face. "Emily, He remembered her, a bright girl who loved to read, who wanted to be a teacher, one of the 8. She graduated from college last year, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. She's getting married next month. She's alive because a doctor broke the rules to save her. A doctor who went to prison for what he did. I'm sorry, John whispered. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Sorry. Marcus laughed, wiping his own eyes. Mr. Hazen, yes, I know who you are. You gave my family 12 more years with Emily. You gave her a chance to grow up, to fall in love, to live. How could I be sorry? Because I went to prison, John said. Because what I did was illegal. Because 8 families had to watch someone they trusted get destroyed by the system. 8 families got to keep their children, Marcus corrected. That's what matters. And John, can I call you John? I've been thinking about that anonymous protocol. The one that's saving Emma right now. The handwriting looked familiar. The approach to combination therapy. The attention to side effect management. It all reminded me of the case studies I read in medical school. Your case studies. John said nothing. I'm not going to tell anyone, Marcus said. But I am going to ask you something. Emma's responding to treatment, but we don't fully understand why. We're following the protocol, but we're doing it blind. If something goes wrong, if the cancer adapts again, we won't know how to adjust. Will you help us? Not officially, not publicly, but behind the scenes. Guide us. Tell us what to watch for. I can't, John said. If they find out I've been involved, they won't, Marcus promised. It'll be between you and me. I'll bring you the lab results. You'll tell me what they mean. I'll ask the questions in meetings, make the suggestions. No one will know. Why would you risk your career for me? John asked. Because you risked everything for my sister, Marcus said simply. Because you're still trying to save lives even though the system destroyed you for it. And because Emma Richardson deserves every chance we can give her. Even if that means breaking a few rules about who gets to provide medical advice. John was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Michael, about the 8 children, about Emma fighting for her life upstairs. Okay, he whispered. I'll help. But Marcus, if anything goes wrong, if they find out, you blame me. You say I manipulated you. You protect yourself. Deal, Marcus said, extending his hand. They shook, 2 men bound by a shared belief that saving lives mattered more than following rules. Over the next week, John and Marcus developed a secret partnership. Marcus would bring lab results to the supply closet where John took his breaks. John would analyze them, identify patterns, suggest adjustments. Marcus would then present these insights in team meetings, carefully phrased as his own observations or things he'd read in the literature. Emma continued to improve. The blast cell count dropped to 20%, then 15%, then 10%. The aggressive leukemia that had defied every conventional treatment was finally retreating. But on day 8, something changed. Marcus found John at 3 a.m., his face pale with worry. We have a problem. Emma's showing signs of cytokine release syndrome, fever of 103, dropping blood pressure, confusion. Drive. Foster started the standard protocols, but she's not responding. John grabbed the lab printouts from Marcus's hands, scanning them rapidly. His mind worked through the data with the speed of 15 years of experience. The timing's wrong, he muttered. CRS usually presents within 72 hours of CAR-T infusion. This is day 8. This isn't classic CRS. Then what is it? Marcus asked desperately. John closed his eyes, thinking back to his unauthorized trials. He'd seen this before. A delayed inflammatory response caused by the specific combination of inhibitors he'd used. The standard CRS protocols wouldn't work because this wasn't standard CRS. It was a unique reaction to his particular combination therapy. You need to switch her to methylprednisone, 1,000 milligrams for, John said urgently, and add anakinra, 100 milligrams subcutaneous. The standard tocilizumab won't work for this reaction. How do you know? Marcus asked. Because I've seen it before, John said. Then, realizing what he'd admitted, he quickly added, I read about it. There's a case study from 2015, published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. Delayed inflammatory response to combination checkpoint inhibitor therapy. Marcus looked at him knowingly but said nothing about the slip. Doctor, Foster will want to know why I'm suggesting such an unusual combination. Show her the article, John said. Tell her you were researching similar cases and found this. The treatment protocol is exactly what I just described. Did you write that article? Marcus asked. John smiled bitterly. No. I treated the patient, but I was already under investigation. I couldn't publish. A colleague took my data and published it without crediting me. But the patient lived. That's what matters. Marcus looked at him with something like awe. You saved a life and didn't even get recognition for it. Recognition doesn't save patients, John said. The right treatment does that. Now go. Emma doesn't have time for us to stand here talking. Marcus ran through the glass walls. John watched as the young resident found Amanda Foster outside Emma's ICU room and urgently explained the treatment change. He saw Amanda's skeptical expression, saw Marcus showing her something on his phone, the journal article, saw her face change from doubt to consideration to decision. Then Amanda nodded and they rushed into Emma's room. John waited, prayed. The verses from the Bible his mother loved echoed in his mind. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. He'd asked for a chance to save Emma. He'd sought a way to use his knowledge despite his disgrace. Was the door finally opening? 5 hours later, Marcus returned with tears of relief on his face. It worked. The fever's breaking, blood pressure's stabilizing. She's becoming coherent again. John, you saved her. Again. John felt his legs go weak with relief. She's not saved yet, just better. Keep monitoring. Watch for secondary infections, renal function, any signs of, I know, Marcus said gently. I'll watch everything. But John, you need to understand something. What you just did, predicting that reaction, knowing exactly how to treat it, that saved her life. Without you, we would have kept using tocilizumab. It wouldn't have worked. She would have died. You would have figured it out eventually, John said. Maybe, Marcus said. But eventually might have been too late. John, you can't keep hiding your gift. Emma's alive because of you. 8 children grew up because of you. How many more could you save if you weren't forced to work in the shadows? I made my choice 10 years ago, John said. I broke the rules. I have to live with the consequences. But do the patients? Marcus asked. Do children like Emma have to die because the system is more interested in punishing you than in using your knowledge? John had no answer for that, but their secret couldn't last forever. 2 days later, John was cleaning near the conference room when he heard a voice he hadn't heard in years. A voice that made him freeze in place, his heart pounding. I'm telling you, Richard, someone in this hospital knows advanced oncology protocols that aren't in any current literature. Doctor, Amanda Foster was saying, the anonymous treatment plan was just the beginning. We've had insights, suggestions, course corrections that have kept Emma alive. Someone is guiding this treatment from the shadows. And you think it's Hayes? Came the other voice. Drive. Helen Rodriguez, his former mentor from his doctorate days. John's hands began to shake. Helen was here. The woman who'd taught him everything about molecular oncology. The woman who'd testified at his trial, the only person who'd defended him, who'd said his treatments were scientifically sound even if ethically questionable. The woman whose career had been damaged for standing by him. Who else could it be? Richard said. The knowledge required, the specific expertise in adaptive leukemias, the unconventional but brilliant approaches. It all points to him. Jonathan Hayes is a cleaning assistant, Lawrence said coldly. John recognized the contempt in his voice immediately. He lost his license. He has no legal right to practice medicine or advise on treatments. If he's interfering with patient care, he's committing another crime. Interfering? Amanda's voice was sharp. Lawrence, Emma Richardson is alive because of whoever's helping us. Call it interference if you want, but I call it a miracle. Miracles don't exist, Lawrence said. Only science and rules. And Hayes broke the rules. He also saved 8 children, Helen said quietly. Children who were terminal. Children the system had given up on. I reviewed every one of his unauthorized cases after his conviction. Do you know what I found? 8 children who should have died, who lived. Not one death that could be attributed to his treatments. 0. His success rate was 100%. The FDA disagreed, Lawrence said. The FDA was protecting its authority. not evaluating his science, Helen shot back. Lawrence, I've spent 40 years in medicine. I've seen brilliant doctors destroyed by bureaucracy and mediocre doctors protected by it. Jonathan Hayes was the most talented oncologist I've ever mentored. What he did was legally wrong, but was it morally wrong? I'm not so sure anymore. Are you saying we should just let a convicted felon practice medicine illegally? Lawrence demanded. I'm saying we should ask ourselves why a man who lost everything, his son, his career, his freedom, still cares enough to try to save lives, Helen said. And maybe, just maybe, we should consider that our system failed him before he failed the system. John couldn't listen anymore. He quietly moved away from the door, his heart pounding. Helen was here. She still believed in him. After everything, someone from his old life still thought he'd made the right choice. That night, as John was preparing to leave the hospital, Sandra found him. There's someone who wants to see you, she said. Room 401. It's empty. We use it for private consultations. I can't, John said. If they know I've been involved, she already knows, Sandra said gently. And John, she's not here to accuse you. She's here to help. It's Dr. Rodriguez. John felt panic rising. Helen's here? Sandra, I can't face her. Not after everything. Not after what happened to her career because of me. She doesn't blame you, Sandra said. She never did. Go talk to her, John. You owe yourself that much. With trembling hands, John walked to room 401 and knocked. Come in, Helen's familiar voice called. He entered. Helen stood by the window, older now, her hair gray where it had been black. Lines on her face that hadn't been there 10 years ago. But her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, were exactly the same. She turned and smiled at him, and John saw tears forming. Hello, Jonathan, she said softly. It's been too long, Dr. Rodriguez, John said, his voice breaking. I didn't expect to. I mean, I heard you were consulting here, but I didn't think that I'd want to see you. Helen finished. She walked toward him. John, I've been looking for you for 2 years, ever since I heard you were working here. But you're very good at being invisible. I've had practice, John said. Helen studied his face, taking in the gray in his hair, the lines of suffering etched around his eyes, the janitor's uniform that was so wrong on a man of his brilliance. What have they done to you? She whispered. Nothing I didn't do to myself, John said. I broke the rules. I paid the price. The rules were wrong, Helen said fiercely. The rules let your son die while bureaucrats shuffled papers. The rules would have let 8 other children die if you hadn't had the courage to break them. The rules exist for a reason, John said. To protect patients. To ensure safety. I understand that now. Do you? Helen asked. Because Emma Richardson is alive right now because you broke the rules again. You wrote that protocol. You've been guiding her treatment. Don't deny it, John. I know your work. I'd recognize your approach anywhere. John said nothing, just looked at the floor. I'm not here to condemn you, Helen said. I'm here to offer you something. A way back. John looked up, hope and fear warring in his chest. I'm a consultant for the FDA now, Helen explained. Specifically for the Compassionate Use Division. I review applications for experimental treatments for terminal patients. Ironic, isn't it? The same system that convicted you now has me helping patients access the exact kind of treatments you pioneered. Why are you telling me this? John asked. Because the program is broken, Helen said. It's too slow, too bureaucratic, too focused on paperwork instead of people. Jonathan, do you know how long the average compassionate use application takes to process? 9 months, John said bitterly. Same as it did when Michael died. Exactly, Helen said. Nothing has changed. We're still letting children die while we dot I's and cross T's. I've been fighting to reform it for 5 years, but I need help. I need someone who understands the science, who's lived through the system's failures, who has the courage to challenge conventional thinking. You want me to help reform the FDA? John almost laughed. Helen, they convicted me. I'm a felon. They destroyed my career. Your conviction was vacated, Helen said. John stared at her. What? 3 months ago, Helen said. A federal judge reviewed your case. New evidence came to light, testimony from the 8 families whose children you saved. Medical records proving your treatments were scientifically sound. Internal FDA documents showing your approval for Michael's treatment had been deliberately delayed. Due to budgetary concerns rather than safety issues, the conviction was overturned. John, you're not a felon anymore. John felt the room spin. Why didn't anyone tell me? The order was sealed pending review by the medical board, Helen said. But as of last week, it's official. Your record is expunged. And while you'll need to reapply for your medical license through proper channels, there's no legal barrier anymore. John sat down heavily, unable to process what he was hearing. I'm not a convicted criminal anymore. No, Helen said. You're a brilliant oncologist who was wrongly convicted for trying to save lives. And Jonathan, I want you to help me build something new. A division at the FDA Emergency Compassionate Access. Fast-track experimental treatments for terminal patients. No more 9-month waits. No more children dying while bureaucrats shuffle papers. I want you to lead it. They'll never accept me, John said. The medical community. Some will resist, Helen acknowledged. Some will never forgive you. But John, Emma Richardson is alive because you broke the rules. 8 children grew up because you broke the rules. How many more could live if you had the authority to change the rules themselves? John thought about Michael, about the 9 months of waiting, watching his son fade, knowing he had a treatment that could help but being powerless to use it legally. He thought about Emma, about her drawing unicorns, about her asking if she'd live to see her birthday. What would this position involve? He asked carefully. You'd review applications for emergency experimental treatments, Helen explained. You'd evaluate the science, assess the risks versus benefits, and make recommendations for approval or denial. You'd work with researchers to design safer, faster protocols for testing new therapies. And you'd help reform the regulatory framework to balance safety with urgency. That's a lot of power, John said. It's a lot of responsibility, Helen corrected. But Jonathan, if anyone has earned the right to hold that responsibility, it's you. You've seen both sides, the brilliant researcher developing treatments and the desperate father watching his child die while bureaucracy moves at glacier pace. You understand what's at stake in a way no one else does. John was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, he could see the lights of Houston's medical center, thousands of windows where people fought for their lives, where doctors worked miracles, where families prayed for hope. I have conditions, John said finally. Name them, Helen said. First, Emma Richardson and her family. They deserve to know who designed the treatment that saved her. I won't hide anymore. Not from her. Helen nodded. Agreed. Second, the 8 families from my unauthorized trials. They should be publicly recognized. Their courage in trusting me, in letting me try experimental treatments when conventional medicine had failed them, that deserves acknowledgement. Also agreed, Helen said. And third, John took a deep breath, Marcus Webb, the young resident who's been helping me guide Emma's treatment. He risked his career to let me help. He doesn't get in trouble for that. Whatever happens, he's protected. Done, Helen said. Anything else? Yes, John said. I want to meet Emma. I want to look her in the eyes and know that what I did, breaking the rules, going to prison, losing everything I want to know, it meant something. I think that can be arranged, Helen said with a smile. In fact, I think Emma's mother would very much like to meet you. She's been asking who designed the protocol. She wants to thank them. When? John asked, suddenly nervous. How about now? Helen said. They walked together to the pediatric ICU. John's hands were shaking as they approached Emma's room. Through the window, he could see the little girl sitting up in bed, her color so much better than it had been a week ago. She was drawing unicorns, just like Marcus had said while her mother read to her from a children's Bible. Helen knocked gently. Sarah Richardson looked up, saw Helen, and then her eyes moved to John in his janitor's uniform. Her expression was puzzled. Mrs. Richardson, Helen said, I'd like you to meet someone. This is Jonathan Hayes. He's the one who designed the treatment protocol that saved your daughter's life. Sarah stood up slowly, looking at John with wide eyes. I've seen you. You're the man who cleans the halls. I've seen you mopping floors outside Emma's room. Yes, Mum, John said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. But you're a doctor? Sarah asked, confusion evident on her face. I was, John said. I lost my medical license 10 years ago, but I couldn't stop caring about patients. When I saw Emma's case, when I saw her genetic data, I couldn't walk away. I had to try to help. Why did you lose your license? Sarah asked, her voice careful. John took a deep breath. This was the moment. The truth. 10 years ago, my 6-year-old son Michael had leukemia. I had developed an experimental treatment that could have saved him, but I had to wait for FDA approval. 9 months of waiting while my son died. He passed away 3 days before the approval came through. Sarah's hand went to her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. After that, I couldn't watch other children die while bureaucrats shuffled papers. John continued, his voice breaking. So I started treating terminal patients in secret. 8 children. All of them were dying. All of them had been given up on by conventional medicine. I gave them experimental treatments I'd developed, and all 8 of them lived. Then why? Sarah started. Because what I did was illegal, John said. I conducted unauthorized clinical trials. I violated FDA protocols. I was arrested, convicted, and sent to prison for 5 years. My medical license was revoked. I became this. He gestured to his janitor's uniform. A cleaning man. The lowest position in the hospital where I once conducted groundbreaking research. Sarah walked toward him, and John braced himself for anger, for accusations, for the judgment he'd received from so many others. Instead, she pulled him into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for not giving up on my baby. Thank you for risking everything again to save her life." John hugged her back, his own tears falling freely. "I lost my son," he said. "I couldn't save Michael, but I could save Emma. I had to." Sarah pulled back, looking at him with understanding and compassion. "God brought you to this hospital for a reason," she said. "The verses I read to Emma every night, they talk about how God works through broken people to accomplish his purposes. You were broken, Murdoch Hayes, but God used your brokenness to save my daughter. Mommy." Emma's small voice came from the bed. "What's happening? Why is everyone crying?" Sarah smiled through her tears and walked back to her daughter's bedside. "Emma, sweetheart, this is Mr. Hayes. He's the reason you're getting better." John approached the bed slowly, looking down at the little girl who represented everything he'd fought for: hope, life, second chances. "Hi, Emma," he said softly. "You're the janitor," Emma said, recognition in her eyes. "I've seen you cleaning. You always smile at me when you walk by." "That's right," John said. "I clean the laboratories here. But you're also the one who made me better?" Emma asked, her 9-year-old mind trying to understand. "I helped," John said. "The doctors did all the hard work. I just gave them some ideas." "Mommy says you used to be a doctor," Emma said. "Why do you clean now?" John smiled sadly. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Emma. I made some big mistakes, and I had to. Well, I had to do different work after that." "Were they bad mistakes?" Emma asked with the directness of a child. "Some people thought so," John said. "I broke some rules, important rules, but I broke them because I was trying to help sick kids like you." Emma thought about that for a moment. Then she held out one of her drawings, a unicorn with a mop and bucket. "This is you," she said. "You're the magic janitor. That's what the nurses call you." John laughed through his tears. "I don't know about magic. I just know about medicine." "It's magic to me," Emma insisted. "Good magic. God magic." She handed him the drawing. "You can keep it, to remember." John took the drawing with trembling hands. "Thank you, Emma. I'll treasure this." Over the following weeks, Emma continued to improve dramatically. The leukemia went into complete remission. Her blast cell count returned to normal. The aggressive cancer that should have killed her was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. The hospital buzzed with excitement. Word spread about the mysterious treatment protocol that had saved the little girl everyone had written off as terminal. Researchers wanted to study it. Medical journals wanted to publish it. Other hospitals wanted to replicate it. And everyone wanted to know who designed it. 2 weeks after Emma's remission was confirmed, the hospital held a press conference. John stood backstage, wearing a borrowed suit that felt foreign after 2 years in a janitor's uniform. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You don't have to do this," Helen said. standing beside him. "We could present the case study without revealing your involvement." "No," John said firmly. "I'm done hiding. Emma's family knows. Marcus knows. Sandra knows. If I'm going to move forward, if I'm going to help reform the system, I can't do it from the shadows anymore. Some people won't forgive you," Helen warned. "Some will still see you as a criminal, no matter what we say." "I know," John said. "But Emma's alive. 8 children before her are alive. That's what matters, not what people think of me, Doctor." Richard Thornton walked onto the stage first. Approaching the microphone to address the assembled reporters, medical professionals, and hospital staff, John could see Sandra in the audience, smiling encouragement. He could see Marcus sitting in the front row, and he could see Emma's family, Sarah holding Emma's hand, both of them watching intently. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, "thank you for coming. Today we're announcing a breakthrough in the treatment of rare pediatric leukemias. 2 weeks ago, 9-year-old Emma Richardson was given 2 weeks to live. Today, she is in complete remission." The audience murmured with excitement. This remarkable outcome was made possible by an unconventional treatment protocol that combined cutting-edge genetic analysis with targeted immunotherapy. Richard continued. "The protocol was designed by someone who understood this particular cancer variant better than anyone in the world. Someone who saw a solution where the rest of us saw only failure." Richard paused, looking toward the wings where John stood. 10 years ago, this person made choices that cost him his career. He broke rules in an attempt to save lives. The medical establishment punished him for that. We destroyed his reputation, revoked his license, and sent him to prison. For the past 2 years, he's worked in this hospital as a cleaning assistant, invisible to most of us, forgotten by the system he once served. The audience was completely silent now. "But he never forgot how to heal," Richard said. "He never lost his gift. And when a 9-year-old girl was dying, when every conventional treatment had failed, he couldn't stay silent. He risked everything again to save her life." Richard looked directly at the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the man who designed the protocol that saved Emma Richardson. Drive, Jonathan Hayes." John walked onto the stage, his legs shaking, his heart pounding. The reaction from the audience was mixed. Some people stood and applauded. Others sat in shocked silence. A few looked angry or disgusted. John saw all of it, but he focused on Emma, sitting in the front row, waving at him with a big smile. He approached the microphone. "Thank you, Dr. Thornton," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "And thank you all for being here today." He took a deep breath. 10 years ago, I stood in a very different place. I was a respected oncologist, a researcher, someone who'd published 47 papers in prestigious medical journals. I had a career, a reputation, a future, and I had a son. Michael. He was 6 years old. He loved dinosaurs and insisted on wearing his Superman cape everywhere. And he had leukemia. John's voice grew stronger. "I developed an experimental treatment for Michael's specific cancer variant, but I needed FDA approval to use it. So I applied, and I waited, and I watched my son get sicker. I begged the FDA to expedite the process. I showed them my research, my calculations, my evidence. They said they needed more time, more reviews, more committees." "Michael died on February 3, 2015, John said. "The FDA approval came through on February 6th. 3 days too late. 3 days that cost my son his life." He could see people in the audience wiping their eyes. "I went insane with grief," John admitted. "I couldn't accept that bureaucracy had killed my child, so I decided I would never let it happen again. I started treating terminal pediatric cancer patients in secret, children who'd been sent home to die, children whose parents were desperate enough to try anything. I gave them experimental treatments I'd developed, and all 8 of them, every single one, went into remission and survived. I broke the law," John said firmly. "I violated FDA protocols. I conducted unauthorized clinical trials, and I was caught, convicted, and sent to federal prison for 5 years. I don't claim I was innocent. I broke the rules, but I saved 8 lives." He paused, looking out at the audience. "When I got out of prison, I couldn't practice medicine anymore. My license was revoked. My reputation was destroyed. No hospital would hire me as a doctor. So I took the only job I could get, cleaning laboratories. The same laboratories where I used to conduct research. I mopped floors. I emptied trash cans. I was invisible. And then I met Emma Richardson, John said, his voice softening. I saw her genetic data on a computer screen. I saw a mutation that everyone else had missed. And I knew I could save her. But I was nobody. Just a janitor. Just a convicted felon. Who would listen to me? So I wrote the protocol on a piece of scrap paper and left it where the doctors would find it, John said. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't ask for credit. I just wanted to save a little girl who reminded me so much of my son. He looked directly at Emma. And it worked. Emma is alive. The cancer is gone. She's going to grow up, go to school, maybe become a doctor herself someday. She gets a future. And that's worth everything I lost. John turned back to the audience. I'm telling you this story because the system that destroyed me is still destroying others. Right now, there are children dying while they wait for experimental treatments to be approved. There are parents watching their kids fade away while bureaucrats shuffle papers. There are doctors who know how to save lives, but can't because the rules won't let them. The rules exist for good reasons, John acknowledged. To protect patients, to ensure safety, to prevent harm. But sometimes the rules become more important than the people they're supposed to protect. And when that happens, we need the courage to change them. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, who's here today, has offered me a position with the FDA's Compassionate Use Program, John said. We're going to work together to reform the system, to make it faster, more responsive, more focused on saving lives than protecting bureaucracy. We're going to create pathways for terminal patients to access experimental treatments without waiting 9 months for approval. Will we make mistakes? John asked. Probably. Will some treatments fail? Almost certainly. But right now, we're making the worst mistake of all. We're letting people die who could have been saved. And I refuse to accept that anymore. He looked at the cameras, knowing his words were being broadcast across the country. To every parent out there whose child is fighting cancer, I see you. I've been you, and I'm going to fight for you. To every doctor who's watching a patient die while waiting for approval for a treatment could help, I understand. And I'm going to fight for you too. My son Michael died because the system failed him, John said, his voice breaking. But his death doesn't have to be meaningless. Every child we save through faster approvals, through better protocols, through a system that values lives over paperwork, that's Michael's legacy. That's how we honor the children we couldn't save. He stepped back from the microphone. Thank you. The applause started slowly, then built. Within seconds, most of the audience was on their feet. John saw Emma jumping up and down, clapping enthusiastically. He saw Sarah Richardson crying. He saw Marcus Webb standing and applauding, a huge smile on his face. He saw Sandra, tears streaming down her face, nodding at him with pride. But he also saw the dissenters. Drive, Lawrence Bennett sat with his arms crossed, his face hard. Several other doctors looked uncomfortable, uncertain. John knew he hadn't won everyone over. Some people would never forgive him for breaking the rules, no matter how many lives he saved. And that was okay. He wasn't doing this for approval. He was doing it for the children. After the press conference, John was immediately surrounded by reporters, medical professionals, and families affected by pediatric cancer. One woman pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Hayes. She called out, Dr. Hayes, please. John turned. The woman was in her 40s, well-dressed, carrying a photo. You don't remember me, she said. But 10 years ago, you saved my daughter, Rebecca Chen. She was 7, stage 4 leukemia. Everyone said she'd be dead in 6 months. You treated her in secret, and she lived. She held up the photo. It showed a beautiful young woman in a college graduation gown, smiling at the camera. This is Rebecca today, the woman said. She just graduated from MIT. She's studying to be a cancer researcher. Because of you. Drive. Hayes, you didn't just save 8 children. You saved 8 futures, 8 families, 8 possibilities for what those children could become. Rebecca is alive because you had the courage to break the rules. John hugged her, both of them crying. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for letting me know she's okay." More people came forward. Parents whose children John had saved. Siblings of his patients, friends. All of them wanting to thank him, to tell him how the children he'd saved were thriving, to share what those lives had become. One young man in his 20s approached shyly. "Dr. Hayes, I'm David Chen. You saved my life when I was 7. John remembered. The boy with the genetic mutation everyone said was untreatable. "David," John said, his voice full of wonder. "Look at you. You're all grown up." "I'm in medical school," David said. "Second year. I want to be a pediatric oncologist. Because of you. Because you showed me that sometimes the bravest thing a doctor can do is fight for what's right, even when everyone says you're wrong." John talked with each family, heard each story, saw the living proof that his choices as illegal and career-destroying as they'd been had mattered. 8 children had become 8 adults, each pursuing their dreams, each living lives they wouldn't have had without his intervention. But the most important meeting came last. Emma Richardson walked up to him, holding her mother's hand. She'd changed out of her hospital gown and was wearing regular clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt with a unicorn on it. She looked like a normal 9-year-old girl, not a cancer patient fighting for her life. "Dr. Hayes," Emma said formally, then giggled. "That sounds so weird. You'll always be Mr. John the janitor to me." John knelt down to her level. "You can call me whatever you like, Emma, as long as you keep drawing unicorns." "I will," Emma promised. "And Dr. Hayes, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor too, like you. I want to help kids who are sick." "You'll be a wonderful doctor," John said. "You've already learned the most important lesson, that being sick makes you understand patients in a way healthy people never can. You'll be able to help them because you know what they're going through." Emma hugged him tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. "Mommy says you're a hero." "I'm not a hero," John said. "I'm just a man who couldn't walk away from a child who needed help." "That's what makes you a hero," Emma said with the simple wisdom of a child. Over the following months, John's life transformed in ways he'd never imagined. He accepted Helen's offer to lead the Emergency Compassionate Access Division at the FDA. His first action was to streamline the application process, reducing approval time from 9 months to mere days for truly terminal cases, where conventional treatments had failed. His second action was more ambitious, working with Helen and a growing network of supporters. He founded the Michael Hayes Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. The foundation had 3 primary goals: fund research into rare childhood cancers, provide free genetic testing to identify treatment options for patients who couldn't afford it, and advocate for reforms in drug approval processes that balanced safety with urgency. "Too many children die while we wait for perfect solutions," John told donors at the foundation's first fundraising gala. "My son Michael was one of them, but he doesn't have to have died in vain. Every child we save through faster access to treatments, through better genetic matching, through reformed protocols, that's Michael's legacy. That's how we honor the children we've lost." The foundation's first major initiative was a national genetic database for rare pediatric cancers. Working with hospitals across the country, they collected genetic profiles from young cancer patients and matched them with experimental treatments that targeted their specific mutations. Within 2 years, the database helped save 43 children who had exhausted conventional treatment options. John personally reviewed every case, designed treatment protocols when needed, and followed each patient's progress with the dedication he'd once given to his own research. Marcus Webb left his residency to join the foundation full-time as director of clinical research. "I became a doctor because of what you did for my sister," he told John. "Now I want to help you do it for others." The foundation also established a program called Second Chances, which provided employment and training for people with criminal records who wanted to work in medical research or support roles. "Everyone deserves a second chance," John told the first class of Second Chances participants. "I got mine. Some of you will get yours. Use it wisely. Use it to help others. Use it to prove that your past doesn't define your future." One of the program's first graduates was a woman named Carmen Rodriguez, who'd served 8 years for drug trafficking. She'd gotten her GED in prison and discovered a passion for science. Through Second Chances, She received training as a laboratory technician and was eventually hired by the Anderson Cancer Research Center, the same hospital where John had once worked, as both a renowned researcher and later as a janitor. Dr. Hayes gave me hope when I had none, Carmen said at her graduation ceremony. He showed me that redemption is possible, that broken people can be put back together, that our worst moments don't have to be our final moments. I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring that gift by helping save lives. Dr. Lawrence Bennett, who'd been John's harshest critic, eventually approached him at a medical conference 6 months after Emma's recovery. Hayes, Lawrence said stiffly, I owe you an apology. John looked at him in surprise. You don't owe me anything, Lawrence. Yes, I do, Lawrence insisted. I spent 10 years thinking you were a dangerous criminal who'd put patients at risk. I was wrong. You were a desperate father who couldn't watch children die while bureaucracy moved slowly. I should have understood that. You were protecting the system, John said. The system exists for good reasons. But the system failed you, Lawrence said. And it failed Michael. And it's failed countless other patients who died while waiting for approvals that should have taken days, not months. He extended his hand. I've been talking with Dr. Rodriguez about ethics committee reforms. We'd like your input. They shook hands. While they never became close friends, they developed a working relationship built on mutual respect and a shared goal, protecting patients while still allowing innovation and compassion in medical care. Dr. Amanda Foster also joined the Foundation's board of directors, bringing her expertise in molecular oncology and her fierce advocacy for patients. She and John co-authored several papers on accelerated approval processes for pediatric cancer treatments, work that influenced FDA policy nationwide. You were right about the system, Amanda told John during a research session. It's designed to protect itself more than patients. But John, you're changing it. One patient at a time, one protocol at a time. You're showing the medical establishment that compassion and science aren't opposites, they're partners. Perhaps John's most important partnership was with Nurse Sandra Price, who retired from the hospital after 40 years, but immediately joined the foundation. As director of patient advocacy, I've spent for decades watching good doctors get crushed by bad systems, Sandra said. I'm not going to spend my retirement staying quiet. Let's fix this, John. Let's build something that honors the patients we couldn't save by saving the ones we still can. Together, they created a patient navigation program that helped families access experimental treatments, understand genetic testing results, and navigate the complex world of clinical trials and compassionate use applications. Medicine is complicated, Sandra told families at foundation workshops. But caring about patients shouldn't be. We're here to translate the science, to fight the bureaucracy, to make sure your child gets every possible chance. Because every child deserves that chance. 5 years after saving Emma Richardson, John stood at a podium addressing the American Society of Clinical Oncology's annual conference. The room was packed with thousands of oncologists, researchers, and medical professionals from around the world. Behind him on the stage sat 8 young adults, the original 8 patients he'd treated in secret. 10 years ago, they'd insisted on being there, on showing the world what happened when a doctor had the courage to break rules for the right reasons. When I lost my medical license 15 years ago, John began, I thought my life in medicine was over. I thought I'd failed everyone, my son, my patients, my profession. I spent 5 years in prison, and then 2 years cleaning the same laboratories where I used to conduct research. I was invisible, forgotten, written off. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But then a 9-year-old girl named Emma Richardson was dying, and I had knowledge that could save her. I had a choice, stay invisible and let her die, or risk everything one more time to give her a chance. I chose the risk, and that choice changed everything. John clicked to a slide showing Emma, now 14, healthy and vibrant, playing soccer. This is Emma today. She's cancer-free. She's thriving. She just started high school. She wants to be a doctor specifically. She wants to be an oncologist who helps other kids with cancer. The audience burst into applause. But Emma isn't the only one, John continued, gesturing to the 8 adults on stage behind him. These are the 8 patients I treated illegally 15 years ago. The 8 children I went to prison for saving. Let me introduce you. One by one, the 8 came forward to speak. Emily Webb, Marcus's sister, now a college graduate working in cancer advocacy. Rebecca Chen, finishing her doctorate in cancer biology at Met. David Chen, completing his medical residency in pediatric oncology. 5 others, each with their own story of survival, their own path forward, their own proof that John's illegal actions had created real, lasting good. These 8 people wouldn't be here today if I'd followed the rules. John said after they'd finished speaking, they'd be dead. 8 families would have buried their children. 8 possibilities for what these lives could become would have been erased. He let that sink in. I'm not showing you these faces to justify breaking the law, John said. I'm showing them to challenge all of us. Every one of these 8 people, every single one would have died under the system as it existed. They would have died while waiting for approvals. They would have died because their cancers were too rare to attract research funding. They would have died because we valued protocol over people. He clicked to a new slide, a quote from the Bible his mother had loved. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. In medicine, John said, we meet strangers every day, patients we don't know, with diseases we've never seen, facing challenges we can't fully understand. How we welcome them, how we fight for them, how we refuse to give up on them even when the protocols say there's no hope. That's what defines us as healers. He looked directly at the audience. I broke the rules. I paid a terrible price for that. But I'd do it again, because 8 children, now 8 adults lived who should have died. And now, with reforms and better systems, we can save lives without breaking rules. We can have both compassion and ethics. We can heal the system even as we heal patients. My son Michael died while I waited for bureaucracy to give me permission to save him. I'll carry that grief forever. But his death doesn't have to be meaningless. Every child we save through faster approvals, through genetic matching, through reformed protocols, that's Michael's legacy. That's how we transform tragedy into purpose. John paused, his voice thick with emotion. God doesn't waste pain. The verses I grew up reading promised that all things work together for good, even the terrible things. I didn't believe that for a long time. How could Michael's death be good? How could my prison sentence serve any purpose? How could 2 years mopping floors lead anywhere meaningful? But then I saved Emma, and I found these 8 adults who'd grown up healthy because I'd broken the rules. And I met Helen Rodriguez, who never stopped believing in me, and dozens of families who trusted me with their children's lives. And I realized God was building something through my brokenness. A foundation, a program, a movement to change how we approach terminal illness in children. He smiled through his tears. The healing hands aren't just mine anymore. They're every doctor who advocates for faster approvals, every researcher who shares genetic data freely, every parent who demands better for their child, every former convict who gets a second chance to contribute to society. We're all healing hands now. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. That evening, John drove to the cemetery where Michael was buried. He visited every month, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he brought the 8 adults with him, the children whose lives he'd saved, who'd become living proof that his sacrifice had meaning. They stood together around Michael's gravestone as John spoke to his son. I couldn't save you, buddy, John said, his voice breaking, and I'll regret that every day of my life. But I've saved others in your name. 51 so far, 8 from before, 43 from the foundation. And we're just getting started. Your death wasn't meaningless, Michael. It was the seed that grew into something bigger than I could have imagined. Emily Webb stepped forward and placed flowers on the grave. Thank you, Michael. She said softly, I'm alive because your dad loved you so much he couldn't let other children suffer what you suffered. I'm getting married next month. I'm going to name my first son Michael, so your name lives on. One by one, the other 7 came forward, each placing something on Michael's grave: flowers, photos, small tokens, each thanking a little boy they'd never met for inspiring his father to save their lives. John watched through his tears, feeling the weight of 15 years finally beginning to lift. Michael's death had been tragic, senseless, unfair, but it hadn't been meaningless. Through John's grief and determination, through his willingness to break rules and face consequences, Michael's death had sparked changes that would save hundreds, maybe thousands of children in the years to come. As they walked back to their cars, David Chen fell into step beside John. "Dr. Hayes, I start my fellowship at MD Anderson next month. Pediatric oncology, specializing in rare leukemias. I'm going to dedicate my career to making sure no child dies waiting for treatment approval. That's my promise to Michael, to you, to all of us who lived because you refused to give up." John put his arm around the young man's shoulders. "He'd be proud to know his death led to your life, David, and to your calling." That night, alone in his apartment, no longer the sad studio of a janitor, but a comfortable home of a man rebuilding his life, John sat at his desk and began writing. Not a medical protocol this time, but a letter. A letter to every child fighting cancer, to every parent watching their child suffer, to every doctor struggling with impossible choices. He wrote about hope, about second chances, about the courage to challenge systems that fail the people they're supposed to protect, about how God works through broken people and tragic circumstances to create unexpected redemption. He wrote about Michael, about Emma, about 8 children who became 8 adults, about 43 more saved through the foundation, about a cleaning man who never stopped being a healer, who proved that credentials and titles matter less than compassion and knowledge. And he wrote about the healing hands, not just his own anymore, but the hands of everyone who refused to accept that impossible meant don't try. The hands of researchers and nurses and advocates and reformed convicts and grieving parents who turned their pain into purpose. The hands that cleaned floors and saved lives. The hands that broke rules and changed systems. The hands that trembled with fear but reached out anyway. The hands that God had chosen, against all logic, to heal. John finished writing as dawn broke over Houston. He looked at his hands, scarred, trembling, calloused from years of manual labor, but also skilled, knowledgeable, capable of miracles when given the chance. These were the hands that had held Michael as he died. These were the hands that had been cuffed and taken to prison. These were the hands that had pushed a mop for 2 years. These were the hands that had written a protocol that saved Emma Richardson. These were the hands that would keep working, keep fighting, keep healing. Because that's what healers do. They don't stop healing just because the system says they should. They don't stop caring just because they've lost everything. They don't stop trying just because they've failed before. They heal because that's who they are. That's their calling. That's their purpose. John Hayes, former convict, former janitor, former broken man, was a healer. And nothing, not prison, not disgrace, not loss, not grief could ever take that away. The healing hands would keep working, one patient at a time, one family at a time, one second chance at a time. Because the cure wasn't in perfect protocols or rigid adherence to rules. The cure was in the courage to save people the system had abandoned. The cure was in hands that refused to stop healing, even when everything else was lost.